What if everything you believe about money is an illusion? The paycheck that feeds you, the savings that make you feel safe, the numbers glowing on your phone. What if none of it is truly real? Imagine discovering that the very foundation of modern life rests not on gold, not on labor, not even on logic, but on belief. That governments can summon wealth out of thin air, delete it with a decree, and still convince everyone it's sacred. Sounds like a conspiracy, doesn't it? But it's not. It's the architecture of the world you live in. And the moment that changed everything already happened. It was a quiet Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971. Most Americans were at home, watching their televisions, unaware that history was about to shift. Then President Richard Nixon appeared on the screen. With calm assurance, he told the nation that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. One short announcement, one soft word, temporary, and centuries of financial order ended. Foreign governments could no longer trade their paper dollars for the gold that had always backed them. The link between money and reality snapped. From that night forward, a dollar was no longer a promise for something tangible. It was a promise for nothing but itself. Faith printed on cotton and ink. To understand how revolutionary that was, we have to rewind to a more disciplined age. After the Second World War, global leaders met in a quiet town in New Hampshire and built what they called the Bretton Woods system. Every major currency was tied to the dollar, and the dollar itself was tied to gold, $35 for 1 ounce. The system worked, inflation stayed tame, trade grew steady, and nations trusted the balance because it was grounded in something physical, something finite. But by the late 1960s, that balance began to crack. The United States was bleeding money, fighting an endless war in Vietnam, funding ambitious social programs, and exporting dollars faster than gold could keep up. In Fort Knox, the vaults were still heavy, but not heavy enough. Foreign governments, sensing weakness, began lining up to exchange their paper for metal. America realized it couldn't keep its promise. So Nixon did what rulers through history always do when promises become inconvenient. He changed the rules. He called it a temporary emergency. It became a permanent revolution. The gold window never reopened. Within a few short years, the world had entered an entirely new era, an era of fiat money, from the Latin fiat, meaning let it be done. Money existed not because it was backed by something precious, but because government declared it so. For the first time in modern history, there was no natural limit to how much could be created. And yet, no one panicked. There were no riots in the streets, no sudden collapse. The next morning, grocery stores opened, paychecks cleared, life went on. The illusion held. But beneath that calm surface, something profound had shifted. Humanity had stepped into a world where trust, not scarcity, was the anchor of value. And when trust is the only anchor, time always brings cracks. Because this wasn't the first time money had drifted away from reality. History had played this song before. Long ago, Rome built its empire on solid silver coins, the denarius. They were honest pieces of metal stamped with the emperor's face and worth their weight. But power has a way of tempting even the disciplined. Emperors needed armies, monuments, luxuries. Silver was finite, ambition was not. So they began to dilute it. Nero reduced the silver content by a third. His successors went further. By the time of the later emperors, the once shining coins were little more than bronze dusted with a thin silver wash. The metal was gone, but the number stayed the same. Prices soared, confidence collapsed, and citizens turned to barter. A civilization that had ruled the known world found its economy unraveling, and not from invasion, but from debasement. Centuries later, another empire tried a new trick. In the 13th century, the Yuan dynasty of China introduced the world's first large-scale paper money. It was brilliant at first, light, portable, perfect for trade across the vast roads of Asia. For a while, it seemed like magic, wealth that could travel by horseback instead of caravan. But magic always asks a price. The emperors discovered an intoxicating secret. Why tax your people when you can simply print what you need? The presses ran, the ink flowed, and the trust evaporated. Merchants began rejecting the paper. Inflation spiraled. In the end, the grand experiment collapsed. leaving the dynasty weaker and the people poorer. Do you see the pattern? The technology changes. Metal coins, paper notes, digital screens, but the temptation remains. Whenever rulers can separate money from real value, they do. And whenever they do, ordinary people pay. Nixon's move in 1971 was not an anomaly. It was another verse in an ancient song, the same melody that echoed through Rome's melting mints and China's paper mills. Only this time, the instrument was global. Rome fell, but the world survived. The Yuan dynasty collapsed, but trade carried on elsewhere. The difference now was scale. The dollar in 1971 was not just an American currency, it was the backbone of the entire global system. When it left gold behind, the rest of the world followed. Currencies began to float freely. Central banks experimented. Governments discovered a new drug, the ability to spend without limit, to borrow without consequence, to promise without proof. At first, it looked like progress. Freed from the weight of gold, economies expanded. Central banks learned to cut interest rates to fuel growth. Governments realized they could run deficits indefinitely. And the people, trusting as always, adapted. Inflation in the 1970s hurt, but the 80s and 90s brought apparent calm. Economists celebrated. A new orthodoxy was born. The belief that central bankers could steer the economy like pilots guiding an aircraft. They called it monetary policy. And for a while it seemed to work. But every miracle hides a cost. Systems built on momentum cannot rest. Debt must grow, money supply must expand, trust must be maintained at all costs. The machine can never slow because if it stops, it dies. Like a shark, it has to keep swimming. And that is the world we inherited. A world running not on gold or goods, but on faith. A world where the printing press became the ultimate weapon and where every promise depends on the next. Once the world let go of gold, everything changed. Quietly at first, then all at once. Governments discovered that paper promises were far easier to make than hard choices. Central banks, once guardians of restraint, became engineers of expansion. Each crisis, each slowdown, became an excuse to print, to borrow, to intervene. And the public, lulled by convenience, stopped asking what their money really was. In the early 1970s, the global debt stood at numbers that still fit on a page. Today it stretches beyond imagination, trillions stacked upon trillions, like a tower built on faith alone. In 1970, the United States owed roughly $370 billion. Now the figure exceeds $34 trillion. The digits have grown so vast they lose meaning, like trying to picture the distance between stars. Yet the entire system depends on one fragile illusion, that these numbers matter only as long as we all agree they do. Through the late 20th century, every major crisis taught the same lesson. The dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, the housing collapse of 2008, the pandemic stimulus of 2020. Different stories, same ending. Each time the cure was more of the disease, more credit, more debt, more liquidity. We were told this was stability, but it wasn't stability. It was acceleration, and acceleration always demands a sacrifice. You can measure that sacrifice in what your money buys. In 1971, an ounce of gold cost $35. Today, it costs more than $2,000. A typical American home once sold for $25,000. Now the same roof costs nearly $400,000. Wages rose, yes, but never enough to keep pace. The result is familiar to almost everyone alive today: working harder, saving less, owning less, paying more. And still the system whispers that everything is fine. This isn't just an American illusion. When the dollar broke free from gold, every other currency followed. Europe, Japan, China, none are tied to any fixed reality anymore. Every central bank plays the same game, adjusting interest rates, inflating debt, hoping the public keeps believing. And here's the brutal truth. Trust holds until it doesn't. History already showed us what happens when it breaks. In the 1920s, Weimar Germany drowned in reparations after the Great War. To pay its bills, the government printed money faster than it could cut the paper. At first it worked. Factories reopened, workers were paid, confidence returned. Then prices began doubling weekly, then daily. Families carried wages in wheelbarrows. Children made kites out of worthless banknotes. When trust finally snapped, the economy collapsed, leaving rage and extremism in its wake, the seedbed of something far darker. Or look to Argentina, a country that has defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times in a single century. The cycle is always the same. Overspend, inflate, devalue, collapse, reset. Citizens adapt the way people always do when institutions fail. They keep foreign cash under mattresses, buy property, or now flee into cryptocurrency. Life goes on, but trust never returns. So why, knowing all this, do we still believe it can't happen again? Not here, not now, not globally. Because this time, the illusion is everywhere. The system born in 1971, Ermon, is no longer national. It is planetary. Every market, every government, every citizen depends on the same fragile idea. That money is real because we act as if it is. But money isn't a law of nature. It's a social contract, a shared dream held together by faith and force. Once it was seashells and salt. Then it became silver and gold. Later, it turned into paper backed by metal. Now it exists as digits in a database. Each step took us further from substance and deeper into abstraction. And each step made manipulation easier. When numbers replace things, control belongs to whoever holds the code. That code is the new frontier. Around the world, governments are racing to create central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. They promise convenience, speed, efficiency, instant transactions at the touch of a screen. But behind the marketing lies something more dangerous: total visibility, total control. Every purchase traceable, every transfer programmable, every citizen's financial life exposed to the state. If money is already an illusion sustained by trust, imagine what happens when the same authority that prints it can also decide how and when it works. Some look to cryptocurrency for salvation. Bitcoin, created after the crash of 2008, was built as digital gold, a form of money with a fixed supply, governed by code rather than politics. In theory, it offers an escape from the endless inflation of fiat currency. But it too carries flaws: volatility, speculation, and the same human greed it sought to escape. Perhaps it is part of the answer, or perhaps just another chapter in the same old story. The search for something real in a world of abstractions. Because the real lesson here isn't about gold or Bitcoin or even the dollar itself. It's about power. Every time money drifts away from tangible value, those in power gain freedom, and everyone else gains risk. Governments learn they can spend beyond their means. Corporations learn they can borrow without discipline. Banks learn they can gamble knowing the public will clean up the mess. And ordinary people, the workers, the savers, the families, become the cushion that absorbs every fall. That is the cycle. That is the trap. And it began the day money stopped being real. So what do we do with that knowledge? First, we stop pretending. We stop repeating the easy myths. That debt doesn't matter, that inflation is temporary, that experts always know what they're doing. We remember what history tried to teach, that no empire, no dynasty, no economy is immune from the laws of trust and consequence. Second, we protect ourselves, not by chasing a single magic asset, but by understanding the system for what it is: a machine built on faith, destined to fail and restart again and again. Real wealth isn't just money. It's awareness, it's resilience. It's the ability to adapt when illusions crumble. Because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Rome's debased silver, China's ruined paper, Weimar's burned banknotes, all whisper the same warning. Once trust dies, money dies with it. And when money dies, societies change forever. The day money stopped being real isn't just a date in 1971. It's a reminder that what seems permanent never is, and that the value of everything begins and ends in the only thing we can't print: trust.